Next Gen Group presents Our Story of Transition with your hosts, Becky and Christine Hopko.
Hi, welcome to Our Story of Transition. I'm Becky,
And I'm Christine.
and we are in episode 2. And we were just starting to have a conversation here, and we thought, let's just have it on the episode. um, because in the first episode, I misstated something, and it is a challenge. And we came to a revelation that there's just a different perception of that. Would you agree?
Well, I would agree. So basically, what happened is that Becky called me husband instead of spouse, as you may have noticed if you watched video number or episode number 1. And so I made the comment to her that she could be perceived as being a little insensitive, right,
Right?
of me and our relationship. But she made actually a really good point. So I'll let her share with you what she shared with me.
So she said, well, you need to not be so nervous. Well, I'm going to be nervous. We're talking about things that are a little weird still for me. Um, but it's also for 2 years of being in the closet while she was not coming out, I had to be both sides of that. So I
Right,
had to call her, him, and my husband, and etc. outside
right.
of the house and to other people because I couldn't say anything. And she's only been out to the public, to everyone,
Mhm.
for roughly
4 months.
4 months.
Mhm.
Okay. Also, before that, I lived with this person for 21 years because we lived together before we got married.
Right.
So, do you think a habit's it's going to take a while,
Well,
even
since
that,
yeah.
because it's a muscle memory, even with me. You know, and those who have been in relationships for a longer time will relate to that too. Or if you have multiple kids, you can't even remember all your kids' names. You're like
Right.
James, Matthew, whatever, whoever's in the room. That's kind of like it is even with the pronouns, the names, etc.
Yep.
as well.
So, to my point is that I kind of forgotten about the fact that before I came out, I really was living a dual role in our lives because at work I was still male, presenting as male, whereas at home I was presenting as female. So, and that changed back last, about 4 months ago. So, it's funny that in a way, I kind of forgot about that. And I was just like, well, we've been married for 23 years, and you've known me as a transgender person for a couple of years now, but still, it is a very valid point, and it's something that we need to consider about our loved ones and spouses and family, especially close family, that and also our close friends
Hmm.
that and workmates that it's going to take time for people to get used to this new person that you are.
Right.
Because even at work, I mean, I've been out at work for about 4 months now, and I still get misgendered. Even by, the other day, went in and had a talk to our human resources department, and while I was talking with, that staff member, she actually misgendered me, but of
Right.
course she corrected herself.
And she's one of the biggest supporters
Right.
of her.
So to that point, it takes people time because they hear a voice they don't see as much. When you're talking to somebody, you have this idea in your head of who that person is by sound, probably,
Hmm.
not so much by sight. So that tends to make people forget about who you are
Well,
now,
and it's
right?
not even your sight, it's who the person you've been talking to for years
Right.
of that. There's lack of a better word right now is muscle memory
Right.
to that. Um, you know, I can't, and I'll have to say too, you guys will hear me speak my Yoda talk occasionally because I speak backwards and
Right.
yeah. So, and guess what? I'm not a spring chicken either. So, all of this change happens later in my life as well.
Right.
So, these are all things that a lot of people aren't thinking of.
Right. Exactly. And to add all on top of that with me, it's like, how do you handle being misgendered? Right. So, I've been struggling with that for the last couple of months at work because if you see someone, a coworker for the first time, and well, at least in my case, let me start with that. Our manager of our uh, center, basically, or our business where I work, uh, worked with me and human resources to come out with an email to let all the employees know about me.
Right.
So, and I agreed that that probably would be the best course of action because honestly, I felt that I don't want to surprise anyone
Right.
unnecessarily,
And I'd also like
right?
to say she and I had a conversation also
Mhm.
on how we thought might be best
Right,
for everybody. So even though it didn't directly impact me per se, only because it impacted you,
right,
did it directly impact me. But I helped her talk through some things. And I was even blessed enough to be able to go to a pre meeting.
right.
And was I helpful?
Yes, yeah, I believe you were. So, there's that whole challenge just of, how do you correct people when they misgender you? Because I almost feel like, if you see somebody for a coworker for the first time and maybe they misgender you, it might be innocent, maybe not. You just don't know. And you can't make assumptions. You can't assume that they are purposely being malicious or hurtful to try to misgender you purposely. Obviously, if you see them multiple times and they continue to misgender you, or you can tell by their body language and by the way they say it,
Right. Well,
other
it's
than that, you're really not going to know.
right. I mean, most people, if you go to them and just make a conversation, I realize it's still new. I am not mad at you for doing it, but could you make an effort to
Right,
change that? And if they continue, then that's a whole nother thing. But there's times where I still slip up in general when I'm out in public because I'll be like, so my husband said, and then I'd be like, okay, no, I have my spouse said, but that's still kind of ingrained
right,
still in me. And so it's going to take long.
right,
And, you know, for misgendering, I often remind that there's a lot of women who look like men who are naturally women, born that way, and vice versa.
right. And this is what I also struggle with on a daily basis too. Is what about my voice? Because my voice is one of the only things that I cannot change. No amount of hormones will ever change my voice. So that stays with me for life. But I wonder if, although the thing is, getting voice surgery is probably one of the riskiest surgeries that you can get as a transgender person. But if you're female to male, then your voice will naturally change and get deeper because of the testosterone therapy.
Right.
But that's the opposite is not true for male to females.
Right. Well, and Christine went to vocal coaching and she learned some things and her voice has changed some,
Right.
but she was also put on the scale of being a gender neutral.
Well, I don't know. I
Isn't
mean,
that how they put
that's
it?
that's how they classified me, but I don't know. I still know that if I was to speak on a phone with somebody, they still would think I'm a guy.
Right.
So, just because of the cadence and everything of my voice, but, looking at other things, like, for example, um, one of the shows that we really like to watch is, The Expanse. So, and that's an Amazon series, and on that show, there is a woman who is an actress who plays um, basically the United Planets or United Nations or whatever they call themselves,
Whatever their
basically United
federations.
Earth.
Yeah.
So, former president, basically, and she has a very, very deep voice for a woman, extremely deep. So, so I look at her, and I'm just like, I'll bet she never gets misgendered. So, but then I'm like, what's wrong with just that? Why should I really need to really change my voice a lot in order to conform to what society feels should be a feminine voice? And I just wonder for myself, and I almost to the decision of just maybe that's just something I won't change about myself,
Well,
and yes, it probably will call me out as being a transgender woman, but you know what? I'm not sure that's,
a bad thing?
a bad thing. Right. Because the other day, a friend of mine on Facebook put up a post that also made a really good, valid point. Kind of helped me a little bit with this struggle about being feminine. Is that as transgender people, we have the ability to transcend, right, the gender stereotypes
Mhm.
that our society has placed within us. And these gender stereotypes are binary. So it's either male or female, when in reality, that is not true. So, nothing that exists in the universe can be exactly polar opposite. There's always the gray area in between. That's
Right.
usually where most of us fall,
Well, and that's
right?
even as a female, I'm very masculine,
Right,
to many pieces. And as even a cis woman, I struggle with not being feminine enough. Am I seeing, I have those same struggles. So
right.
even though there's a gender dysphoria, the gender dysphoria also is a body image
Well, sure. I mean,
combination of those things. And
mhm,
there's lots of females who have that issue with body image as well.
right. So, and it's because they don't conform to what society feels is the standard of what a feminine woman should be like, right?
Right.
So, but that kind of proves the point, though, is that we all struggle with this. It doesn't matter whether you're transgender or not, honestly,
Exactly.
because we all struggle with these images and these perceptions that were given by society in our heads, and nobody really conforms to them exactly.
No, and that's where that um, you know, when Christine was transitioning and is still transitioning, obviously it's a process. One of the first things I asked her was, "What type of woman do you want to be?"
Right, and of course, I had no answer for that. And I really still don't, because I'm still, even after being out in full time for 4 months now, I still don't have an exact idea of how I want to present myself,
Right,
you
and
know?
that's even after 2 years of being able to be free at home,
Right,
going out with some other trans friends, some cross-dressing friends, etcetera, just not being out at work.
right,
So, like, not a half-half, probably a 90-10
right.
type of thing. So and I think that could, definitely be a challenge for anyone,
Mhm.
but I think it's another layer of challenge for those who are transgender because they were taught so much in one society
Right,
of what it is, and then was taught what it meant to be the other society and gender by that teaching of the original, and it's not true.
right. Well, but there's nothing wrong though with trying to be ultra feminine or ultra masculine. That's not what we're saying here. Because I realize there's a lot of transgender people out there who just want to blend in, and that's perfectly fine. I get that. I feel that way too a lot of times in many ways. But when you're like us, and we're putting our story out there, literally, right?
Yeah.
So, if I'm gonna be a public person, a public, person out there, then, there's nothing wrong with trying to blaze your own path, right?
Right, and it's about being your authentic self and not
Right,
what society thinks is your authentic self. Um, to a certain extent, women went through this in the 60s and 70s
right.
of a sort,
Well,
and even
exactly.
80s and 90s and still do it.
Well, I mean, it's as old as, women's rights. So, when women, uh, lobbied to get the right to vote and to, you know
Own land.
yeah, right, because I found that was interesting because you could see a lot of these struggles if you look back in history and you look back at laws that have been passed, but I didn't realize as, being a former man, just how many struggles women actually had, you
Right.
know? Like, one of the other, series that we, watched, it was a Netflix, I think it was short series, was the Queen's Gambit,
Yep. Queen's Gambit, and
right?
then also Mrs. America on
Right?
Amazon were
Exactly.
some great options.
Yeah, I would highly recommend, by the way, Mrs. America. I mean, that was a very, very good, short series that outlined the fact that neither conservatives nor liberals really are correct. I mean, we all have our struggles. We all have our issues to deal with. There's always infighting. There's always something going on.
Right.
So, again, it's trying to be two extremes in society, which we are not. That is not natural. That is not the natural balance of nature.
Right.
So, nature does not seek extreme. So in other words, it's not stormy all the time and it's not sunny all the time either. There's got to be a balance somewhere,
Right. And then there's
right?
just cloudy days,
Right.
just in between.
So, you know, the natural entropy of things is for neutrality, so to say.
Right. But we're taught black or white,
Right.
male or female,
Right.
right or wrong. There's not a gray. But really, life is gray. Life
Right.
is gray with gender. Life is gray with occupations. Life is with even relationships.
Hmm.
Relationships aren't one sided.
Yeah, and that's definitely not cut and dry. And I think maybe too many people these days take it too literally to the point of where, if it's not my way, it's the highway. So too much, there's not enough negotiating going on, I
And
think is right, and
compromising and
compromising, which is, you know, it's a matter of preference in a way, sure. But however, it doesn't follow the natural entropy of nature,
right.
right?
So, just to touch a little bit on that, is that even when Christine came out to me, I had to sit there and figure out what was important to me.
Right.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in in the next episode. 'Cause I think that's where we're going to go next.
Yep.
Um, but that's where I had to do some digging and
Mhm.
figure out. And I didn't make rash decisions because if I did make rash decisions, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Right.
And I think I could speak for the same for you.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. Um, Life is always a compromise. So you're never going to get exactly what it is that you want. You're going to have to make do with what you have. That's the biggest learning lesson, biggest piece of wisdom that, at
And you
least
can build
I've
on that
ascertained.
to get what you want.
Right. And it's also the realization that because you have what you have today doesn't mean that you can't work towards a better tomorrow.
or a different
Right.
tomorrow.
Exactly.
But it's not a tomorrow that's going to happen overnight. It is not gonna be a tomorrow that doesn't have fight, anguish, crying, but also happiness,
Right.
moving forward, community. There's a lot of good things that come out of that as
Right.
well, and growth, the growth of yourself. If you're not willing to stop and look at things, you're not
Well,
growing.
yeah, I mean, I posted a kind of a meme on my Facebook page just the other day that I borrowed from you, and it was the best path towards an ignorant life is to accept that all of your perceptions and knowledge is perfectly fine and needs absolutely no updating at any
Right,
time, right?
right. So we're an ever-growing, changing mass of matter.
Right.
And then our world is an ever-changing mass of matter as well.
Mhm.
And we all have our own thoughts and feelings about that. So it's really hard. And our society relies on labels.
Right, but the fact is that there's only one constant in life, and that is change.
Right,
So, and if you're unwilling to change, it shouldn't be somebody else's fault that they're, you know, that they're that you, or I should say, are unwilling to accept change.
everybody
Right,
has to accept a change and understand how much change they're willing to accept
right,
and how much they're not. And those are all a lot of personal things that you even have to figure out for yourself
right.
before you can be in a relationship with
Sure, it has to do with personal thresholds, but as Brene Brown, one of my favorite speakers, said that change won't happen unless you go outside your comfort zone.
them. Right,
So if we always stay with, and again, that's part of that meme that he just mentioned about living a life of ignorance, is having a comfortable life. Sure, having a comfortable life means not having to deal with a lot of changes and things, but however, that's not how the world works.
right,
So the world will change around us whether we want it to or not, you
right,
know?
right. So, I think we're gonna wrap up, on this particular episode,
Mhm.
but, watch for more episodes. You can always go to our website, ourstoryoftransition.com. You'll see some blogs, you'll see the podcast, the videos. If you're interested in having some questions ask some questions, go to the contact us page. Along with if you would like to come on and tell your story, we want to educate, empower, and try to help as many relationships as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would like to know, how do you handle your transition if you're a transgender person? What are your feelings about it? Go ahead and make a comment. So go to our story of transition, contact us, and leave us a message.
And same with spouses and family members, because this is the only way that each of us can understand how other people may be feeling. And so, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us at Our Story of Transition. Find us at ourstoryoftransition.com. Brought to you by the Next Gen Group.